Round two. All right, so I
Yep.
got all the notifications off. So
Okay.
it's a somewhat recording. People can watch live while we're doing it, so keep that in mind. Since we figured out that I think I saw Warren Berkeley pop in for 3 seconds there.
Okay.
So I don't know. I would like to see if we can some way we can balance the audience so it's not just whoever has liked the page. We can also keep it restricted to just the page. Right now it's public.
Right.
I think we can adjust it so that it is as narrow as we want it to be or as wide. And I don't really care too much about either direction, but something for us to think about.
Sure. I don't either. Yeah.
So,
And you could probably change that depending on what it is.
yeah.
You know, if it's a topic that we only want restricted to a certain group, then we could do that.
Yep. So you're going to probably, I don't know if you see it, but there's more folks popping in. I don't know if that pops up on your side. So
It is. Yeah.
Julie has stopped by. And
Yes.
so Terry, what are we doing here? You know, this is partly my idea, but I guess you're part of the genesis for it too, as well. So what are you thinking about when we've got this crazy idea coming to fruition?
I'm blaming you for all of it.
Well, that's new. Not really. That's actually normal.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I guess, I don't know who's still watching. There's only one now, but
Yeah.
obviously, I think we're trying to do some things about the work of evangelist and try to put together some conversations and some information on that. Largely to encourage, I think, younger guys, which pains me to say that you and I are older guys at this point.
Yeah, at some point I have to accept that reality. I'm still working on the struggle of how that mathematically equates to, my personal reality.
The gray in our beards betrays us, I'm afraid.
Yeah, definitely so.
I was at lectures walking around campus around all these young kids, and I reminded myself that it's been 25 years since I was in their position. So
yeah, and in maybe 6 months, 7 months, we will both have children on that
yes,
same campus. So
yeah.
there is some level of maturity that is expected of us by this point in time.
Well, it's expected.
Yeah.
I would say there's a level of age
Yeah.
that is obviously here. Maturity is in question. That's the problem.
Yeah, most definitely so.
Yeah.
So I'm going to just lay out a couple of things that we've already talked about that we're going to try to accomplish in the future, as well as one key detail. These are not scripted. We're not intending it to be a high-end production of
It's raw. It's pretty
cinematic
raw.
value. So that means we may have to correct ourselves at times. Terry may be seen drinking his fuel for the day, and that's perfectly fine as well. Yes, we both have a deep heart that runs into Tennessee, although neither of us live there at present. Although we visit.
We are displaced volunteers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But maybe not so Davy Crockett like others. So we're kind of laying out some things that we felt like were practical ideas for preachers to get better at. I think we're going to intentionally be a little bit transparent, maybe even a lot transparent about our own failures in that process of becoming more effective that way.
Right.
Some of the things we intend to do will be to reach out to those with more subject matter expertise in certain areas. Maybe it's in textual criticism, maybe it's in biblical history, maybe it's in languages. And so we'll, dig through some of those issues and try to go about it maybe on a weekly basis. That's our current, theoretical terms.
Goal.
Yeah, the goal. And maybe to find a schedule in there that works for the benefit of all in each of those steps. We'll cover some practical stuff, how to study, what to study, working with shepherds, transition in, the work as it transitions from being there a year to being there 10, 15, or 20 years, and maybe even reach out to those who have, again, good experience in there, and try to do so in a way that is upbeat and forward-looking rather than just, these are all the things that we don't like about this particular subject. It's more about, these are the things that we can leverage to a new type of success.
Right. I think also one of the things to point out, some of the stuff would be good for not just preachers, but also members, as you pointed today in your post on your personal page, just the struggle that sometimes goes between leadership and membership. and we all think we're trying, but we're not being successful. So we hope along the way to do that as well, to maybe in some of these discussions, not all, pull back the curtain to have a little bit more understanding to disciples at large, rather than just, it's not just evangelist or even evangelist elder leadership focused.
Yeah, and I'll add one more thing that's really important. Terry and I will not agree on everything.
No.
And we're okay with that. We're trying to still be friends in that process. We've never, as far as I know, agreed on everything, and we're okay with it.
Right.
And when that happens, maybe that'll make for better conversation for folks to see two different viewpoints, two different experiences, two different routes to achieve the same, destination in the long run.
Maybe a little bit later on, as I'm pursuing that maturity that Julie Adams made fun of there a moment ago, is that as far as agreeing on everything, sometimes we need to understand that if we don't agree, we can still understand how to submit to one another and fellowship each other, and do that in a kind way and not cause problems. And that's one of the goals of this, is to be able to understand how to balance all of that and not be difficult, I think.
How to disagree well will probably come up a couple of times in this first year of ideas.
Absolutely.
Something we're also going to try to take advantage of is comments, questions, ideas from the outside, and not just the two of us coming up with stuff. We're hoping to maybe drop in a few other folks in the process that, again, may also disagree with both of us.
Sure.
That will come from maybe different backgrounds, different perspectives or experiences that I think in the long run will create a more vibrant and a more functional understanding of what the work of evangelism is.
Yeah, absolutely.
And one thing that was emphasized, and I think I see this a lot, we make a pithy comment, we say, do the work, but then we never define for ourselves what that work is. And here's an easy conflict of ideas that I've seen. When we talk about the work of evangelists, we kind of bracket it out into categories. And you say, well, the evangelist should be doing these 5 things. Maybe it's teaching Bible classes. Maybe it's, engaging in personal work, as we might define it. Or maybe it's some other layers of things. And then we have this other thing that comes up that doesn't exactly or narrowly meet that specific set of categories, and we go, not my work. Don't do it. And I think there's some ways in which we can potentially, really improve that big basket of ideas in a way that evangelism can be embraced by a larger group of people, and then subsequently becomes a shared task rather than a bracketed out bunch.
Sure. And along those lines, one of the things I've been thinking about lately, we've not talked about this, but the idea of doing the work, I think a lot of times we forget that our work, first and foremost, is equipping and helping people learn how to do the work themselves, which includes us and every member. And so, again, that's part of the goal of all of this, is understanding that, put that into focus.
Yeah.
And like you say, not bracketing it out and trying to excuse ourselves of, hey, that's not my circus, not my monkeys kind of thing. But understand we play a role in a lot of things there. So, yeah, absolutely.
And a very specific way to kind of connect to it would be just thinking about this interesting aspect. Paul was able to, when he was writing to the church of Corinth, kind of deflect from the fact that he hadn't baptized a significant, rememberable portion of the group. He started thinking about that. How does it get to that point where Paul is able to say, I don't think I baptized many of you in a practical way, and or how did he get there? Someone else had to have done that work because it's an important component of it, and he was only one part of the process. I think we need to do better there.
He said he baptized essentially one household, and then all the rest somebody else had to do. And how did that happen? So it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I think
absolutely.
I think there's some additional things that we can probably glean from that. So, again, our goal is also to be short with this stuff. Terry, did you have something that you felt like it was really important for us this week to chew on?
No. Today's more of So anybody that does watch this knows this is the first time out of the box, and took us 5 attempts to finally get it to work. So
Yeah.
A lot of this is just kind of testing and laying out the groundwork, and hopefully generating a little bit of interest into what we're trying to do. And excited to see this kind of slowly build over time, hopefully.
Yeah. We'll see where it goes. There's no long-term plans with this. We're not trying to accomplish anything good than maybe each of us getting better. And I think that's probably, if I have a goal, that's probably the biggest one of theirs, to get ourselves better.
I think this is an iron sharpening iron kind of activity, and with an audience, maybe the best way to describe that. It's here we are trying to help each other in the process. You guys can look in and watch along the way, and maybe join in the conversation every now and then.
Yeah, and I'll say this: I really appreciate Terry's willingness to open up about a lot of these things. I think I've talked extensively over the last year and a half about some of the struggles that preachers have, and maybe we haven't done the best job at being open about that challenge, and the great parts of it, and the lesser, not so good parts of it, in a healthy way.
Yeah, and I think one of the goals of this, by the way, is with that open and honesty, to hopefully encourage some of our younger, more talented men to think about serving God in this way rather than serving God in a lot of other ways secularly. And then, as a disciple, I have a genuine concern about the future of the church as far as workers go, and whether those roles will be filled adequately. And I think you too, we've had those conversations. And I talked recently to a younger guy who's been preaching and who's been very discouraged. And I told him that there's guys like me and you out there that are starting to open up, that are starting to feel comfortable, because we want to make the path easier. We want to protect them in a sense, but we also want to inform them better. And I came into this preaching gig. It was not always my plan. I don't think people understand that, but I was actually was in college and kind of dropped out for a year to find out what I wanted to do. And this is where I ended up after a lot of prayer and some intervention by a family member. And so that was my pathway. That was not always my purpose and goal. And I don't know that I had, even in the first 10 years and maybe first 15, a full understanding of some of the things we'll talk about.
Yeah.
So
I'll balance that out with a similar story. I think it's probably good to know where I'm coming from. I preached an invitation at the Sunnyvale Church of Christ as a new convert because they told me to. It was decidedly awful. And Max Crumley Sr., who was still living at that time, took me aside and told me I was going to preach. And I was like, "You're nuts." And a few steps later, I'm in East Texas working with Barry Pennington in a small church there. And a few steps later, I'm at Florida College. And a few longer, more expensive steps there, I'm at Western Kentucky, sitting in the common area of the student center, just struggling to be interested in my senior level classes. And Bob Buchanan walks by and goes, "What's wrong?" Short version of the story is, I told him I wanted to preach. He's like, "Why aren't you preaching?" "Well, I thought I needed to do this first." He said, "Go preach." So I did that. And, there's a lot more to the story. We'll probably cover some of those things too. But I think those transformative moments that we look back on are so massive, can be accomplished in those little bits of conversation, just like I had with Bob 20 plus years ago.
Yeah. And, it's funny because I think a lot of times I was told, I'm a college dropout, and I was told, "Oh, you can't do this without having something to fall back on."
Yeah.
And here we are today. So I hope to encourage guys by this, and not to make it all rosy. I think that's one of the things we've talked about, is honest discussions. As you said, transparent, sometimes vulnerable on our parts, to make sure that we can help some of these younger men and guys, encourage guys that are in the work, strengthen them as well. So
that's probably enough for today. We'll drop it off right here, and I hope everyone is excited about the possibilities of serving God, of sharing the gospel. And if you've got comments or questions, drop them our way.
All right.
Take care.